Well, it is Monday morning. Surprise! There's no Jeff Ketchum that is here, but that's okay because we have the good-looking people of Orange Bloods, the calendar men of Orange Bloods, the Alex Dunlap, the Jason Sukumel, of course, and myself. Rodolfo is going to be in the house. Juan is in here, and make sure you guys know that I want to make sure you guys know that this show is obviously sponsored by the Rogue Shop. Alex, you partake in some of the products. Jason, are you a Rogue guy or not? I don't know if you're a Rogue guy.
I'm not a Rogue guy. I've never done the edibles. I'm so curious and I want to, but my wife seems to tell me I have an addictive personality. So I don't know. I mean, I've got enough things that I'm trying to fend off. But no, I think I say maybe I'll do that and I'll cut back on my Coors Light. She's like, no, then you'll just do both a bunch. So, but
man, Richard's in the chat. He knows what is it? What is the what's it called? Like the salve or something? The salve, like
the salve, the thing that you rub.
Yeah, I've had so many bad like ankle problems in my life with like always messing my ankles up and stuff. And dude, like at nighttime they hurt sometimes. I just rub that salve on. Like that stuff is. It doesn't necessarily.
Maybe I need to get that shit for my wife then. She's like got aches and pains, and
it's like, dude, it's like a magic potion, dog. I mean,
it feels good.
Yeah, man, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, I got bad knees and stuff, so I'll just rub that stuff on there. And this has probably been the main reason I don't get like any kind of like LCL surgery that's probably necessary. I just keep running and pushing that salve on there, and it works out good. But make sure you guys check out the over at rogueshop.com. What is it called? So it's 400 milligrams pain free. Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, it works. We all partake. The gummies, the cartridges, the salve that he's referring to. They've got all kinds of things too in their shop. They've honestly even have like a chapstick that you can use as well. They have all kinds of different things. Some of it in their shop that is a brick and mortar one, some of it that's online. But make sure you check out our boy Rich, our good friend there. His wife, who kind of does all the work. She's super badass. But check it out and use the promo code at Orangebloods, or just use Orangebloods for your promo code. And I don't know what the hell you're going to get off, but I think Rich is going to send you like everything free. I think that's what he's. Nah, I'm just joking. Just use the promo code and it will end up well. Jason, real quick before we get started, man, you were on vacation. How did that go for you?
It was good, man. The wife and I left the kids at home with Grandma and Grandpa. Went to St. Martin. It's a whole other show, but I've got this system where I use nothing but points whenever we travel, so it's relatively cheap. Even when you get there, the food's cheap and the beaches are nice. And you guys, it's so funny. Like every little hole in the wall market there on their little marquee, it's like Coors Light, bam, like Coors Light on that island is so prevalent. I don't know why. Coors Light, for those who watch, it's like my go-to beer. So it's like my little spot in heaven almost. So we went over there, man. The weather wasn't the best beach weather, but it was still still doable. But it was a good to kind of get away during the off week, kind of recharge the battery and just escape from reality for a little bit.
No kids?
No kids, man. My parents are 73 years old and they have more energy than all three of us combined times two. And they just love watching the kids, man. So we've been pretty fortunate with that we get to do that about once a year. Leave them with Grandma and Grandpa, and the wife and I just kind of enjoy some one-on-one time.
Real quick question for you, Alex. Trick-or-treating tonight for you and the crew?
Yes, unfortunately. I wrote it in my column just now. I said, dude, since when did Halloween turn into a 4-day affair? I mean, they were talking about what happened in the Michigan Tunnel this weekend on Saturday night. And I'm like, well, it's time for me to go look and see what, like, I was at a Halloween party for kids. Like every night this weekend, they had Halloween parties. And now they have Halloween tonight. So, like, my kids are half candy, half human already. I'm like,
what's going to be your balance here, Alex? Because they're going to want the candy, but they're going to be out late. They got school the next day. So, like, are you going to have like a candy cutoff, or are you just going to let them go into some sort of like caffeine coma?
Oh, I mean, my kids are going to look back at their life and talk about how their dad was super strict about stuff. They don't get to eat much of this Halloween candy. This stuff gets kind of. This
you
stuff
eat it, Alex, or what?
No, I don't eat it either. But I mean, it gets put away, and then like every night for the next week or so, they'll be able to choose like a piece of candy after dinner.
Oh,
And
damn,
then
that's
after that,
hardcore.
yeah, after that, it gets thrown out. But dude, out here in Lake Travis ISD, they don't have school on Tuesday. They're just like, man, these kids are going to be wasted junk.
That's
anyway.
smart. Wow.
We'll have a teachers in service this day. So.
Man, that's smart. Yeah, Leander.
Kind of like Monday after Super Bowl should be a holiday. I mean,
that's a good one. Man, Alex, you're right. Eric Torres is right, man. On Presidente, your house is a prison. because could you imagine getting as a kid, getting your stuff just thrown away? You get one.
Well, no, dude. Like we're way off topic, but it's like it isn't only just one, man. I make a play this game with the dice, right? And they roll the dice. And if they roll an even number, they get to have a chocolate candy. If they roll an odd number, they get to have a fruity candy. But if they roll a 1, they get no candy.
Oh no.
This is the worst dad ever.
I don't ever want to hear this.
Great, dude.
Like grounding my daughter on vacation, how strict I am. No, that takes the cake right there.
Sometimes when you go off script, you just never know what you're going to wander into. And this is sometimes why you go off script a little bit, because you never know what you're going to wander into. And now we know Alex is the prison guard / the most restrictive dad ever. His kid. Now we know when his kids are in therapy, we will know when it started, and it was started here in Halloween, and it'll branch over into F you, Dad, I'm moving out at the age of 15. So listen, guys, we've had the bye week. And obviously, Steve Sarkisian spoke today. There wasn't probably a lot of things to really glean. He didn't really talk much about the injuries. He's very vague about those things. So even though we talked about Ryan Watts and Anthony Cook, I mean, that could mean anything as far as him just saying those guys are out there. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to play. I wanted to kind of go big picture a little bit, though. If you guys, with 4 games left, and I kind of want to start getting into one of the things I wrote in my column on yesterday was I started just kind of thinking about what the scenarios are over the next 4 games. We're talking about on the road at Kansas State, a night game as they announced over the weekend, then back home at TCU the following game. That's a night game that was just announced on Monday. Kansas on the road. And then, of course, then close out with Baylor the day after Thanksgiving. Kind of want to get what your thought processes are. And we don't have to necessarily, I don't want you to do a prediction at this moment, but maybe this final stretch, Jason, what this stretch really means for, Sarkisian, this team sitting at 5 wins, only 4 left. So, he doesn't want to go big picture. We can. Mm-hmm. I want to get your thought process of what this final stretch run, looks like. It should look like, and maybe more should look like, what you think optimistically should happen over the next 4 games. And then we'll kind of start breaking down each scenario.
Yeah, well, I think arguably you can make a case. Kansas, we'll see what's going on with their quarterback's still out, right? I didn't miss anything last week. Mm-hmm. But that's 3 weeks away. He may be back. You can make a case. These are the 4 toughest games left on the schedule if Kansas is healthy. I still think Oklahoma's bounced back. They're playing better football. Let's be honest, Texas got pretty fortunate to catch Oklahoma when it did. Oklahoma State's up and down. I'm talking about conference games, of course. Alabama's the outlier there, of course. But your question, Elmore, was what do I expect to happen, and what were the other scenarios? I'm sorry.
Well, just what's an acceptable outcome over the next 4 games for you?
Man, acceptable? I think 2-4 would be acceptable because at Kansas State, I know Texas is favored this weekend. I don't.
You mean 2-2? You mean 2-2?
2 out of 4.
2 and 2.
2 out of 4. Okay, 2 out of 4. Okay.
They're favored this weekend. That's a little surprising to me. TCU coming in. TCU they're undefeated, but they haven't blown the doors off of the competition. They've had to battle back late in a couple games. It's at home. I wouldn't be surprised if Texas is favored in that game. I think 2 but I don't know that I would necessarily pick Texas in either of those 2 games. Then Kansas at home, or at Kansas, and then Baylor at home. So I think 2-2 is acceptable. Is it possible in a perfect world Texas goes 4-0? Yeah, I'm not ruling that out. I don't think Texas goes 0-4. I think for the the more positive outlook on things, I think 3-1 would be. I think most Texas fans would tell you, hey, I'd be pretty happy with 3-1 down the stretch. I think 1-3 is probably the floor there. I don't think they'll go 0-4. Possible. I don't think so. I think 1-3 is probably the floor. I think 2-2 is probably most realistic. I think 4-0 is probably more realistic than 0-4, though. I still think this is a pretty good team when they're hitting on all cylinders. If Quinn Ewers can get into a rhythm, but these are tough games. All 4 of them are tough games. Like I said, you could make a case these are the toughest 4 games left on the schedule. Texas is pretty healthy. Sark said it today. Hey, they're pretty healthy. Even the 2 guys you mentioned, Omar, in the defensive backfield, sound like they've had productive weeks, getting closer back to full strength. So, it's a tough contest this week. This weekend will tell us a lot. And, we heard it. I've kind of made a running joke every week, and it just keeps replaying it. Sark said today, great Monday practice. One of the best they've had. The energy and the tempo and the speed and the flying focus and physicality. I'm like, oh my gosh, so Sark, I love you, dude, but that's almost becoming a weekly running joke. Like,
yes, they never have a bad practice.
Maybe just find a different talking point or a way to say it differently. I don't know, but I think 2-2 is pretty realistic. If you're a Texas fan, I think if you're being objective, I think that would be a satisfactory outcome for these next 4 games.
They have the best practices ever. Like
on Monday, especially, yes.
Monday for sure, Thursday for sure. He always likes their energy and likes the focus of the guys. Like they have some amazing practices, and we'll see if maybe this will be the week it translates to to a road game, which needs to be. Alice, I'll throw the same question at you. What's an acceptable outcome, for in your opinion, not from a Texas fan opinion, but just as a guy who follows this team, what's an acceptable outcome for you?
Well, are we talking acceptable just for over the course of these 4 games, or acceptable
Correct.
For what it means to what the balance of the season means in regard to what the final showing will be?
Well, you know what, Alex? I like both. So how about that?
Okay, well, I mean, here's I saw so from David Williams in chat, he says he thinks it's too difficult to make assumptions for the next 4 games. Too many things happen from one week to the next. Like the football team, I would just focus on games 1 week at a time. So to that, I was with him all the way up until the very end, where he said that fans and analysts just need to get their focus. Like that's ridiculous. The football team certainly does, right? But I mean, it does not matter one bit how focused I am on K-State coming into this one. It really doesn't matter.
You don't think anyone on this football team knows what standings are? Like they all know what standings are.
Yeah.
Like you don't think no one has looked and is trying to think about scenarios?
Right, but the good point that David Williams made is that I was just looking at the ESPN, like the FPI, right, to make the Big 12 championship. And it was actually after the press conferences, I was finishing up my column when I heard Alex Loeb talking about it. And Texas actually right now is still 3rd in the Big 12 with the odds to make it there. It's 40%. KSU is at 44%. And I believe TCU is at 60%. But if Texas were to beat Kansas State, that would vault them to somewhere near like 60%. And then all of a sudden, now you have a team that it's like a team that's in it that could possibly. I don't know if can we figure out on our own? Are we smart enough? Do we have big enough brains to figure out to where if they beat K-State, do they control their own destiny at that point?
I think they would. Well, I don't know because Oklahoma State would factor in there because they're also.
I think they only have Oklahoma State. Is that only 2
losses?
For them?
Texas has 2 losses. K-State would have 2 losses.
But Oklahoma State, they would still lose.
State's played TCU and K-State. So I don't know if they'd control their own destiny, Alex, but I would think their chances would be pretty good if they beat K-State. But if they lose to K-State on the flip side, I can pretty much tell you they're out of the Big 12 championship race because K-State's going to have a 2-game lead on them with head-to-head. TCU's going to have, a 3-game lead on them in conference standings. So this is a do-or-die week for Texas if they even have a chance of making the Big 12 championship game.
I think I'm like Jason. I think the most likely outcome is probably that they go 2-2. I think the second most likely is that they go 1-3. I think the third most likely is that they go 3-1. The fourth most likely is they go 4-0, and the least likely is that they go 0-4. That would be the way that I would sort of power rank the finishes that I would see. As I told you guys before, I mean, a set. What if they go 2-2 down the stretch? That puts them at 7-5 for the season, and then maybe with a bowl game they could get to 8-5. So to me, I would say 7-5 is it's better than last season. People will say, oh, it's an improvement, but man, it's just like what kind of improvement is it to a 7-win team? I mean, isn't that just what Texas has had all these other years before? So I think that
that's the one silver lining of going 5-7. You can say, hey, we made progress, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's an easy thing to say. I think for Texas fans to feel good about the way this season went, if they go 3-1, that to me would be Texas fans saying, look, we got to 8 wins. If we get a bowl game, we can get to 9 wins. Like, I actually feel good about that. I feel okay about it. I think if they go 2-2, Texas fans are going to have to talk themselves into feeling okay about it and saying, look, at least we improved it, but they're going to be going around kicking the can like usual, having to talk themselves into Texas again and yada, yada, yada. So I would say that, acceptability is a kind of hard thing to, it's a hard thing to quantify like that. But I think that my answer would be 3-1 down the stretch. And I do think that that's probably the second most likely outcome.
So there's 5 outcomes. Okay. That's on the board right now. 4-0, 3-1, 2-2, 1-3, 0-4. Okay, so those are the 5. I want us to dive into all 5 of those, and when we get to the one that you think is your most realistic, outcome, let me know. So let's start with the first one. Let's start with 4-0. Jason, what would need to happen? What would need to occur for a 4-0 finish? And I know there's some obvious things there, right? There's some obvious things that, you would tell yourself, well, of course, certain guys got to play better, this and that. But the improvements that you would need to see to say, okay, they ran off four straight 1-2 road games, right? And have this kind, and finish with a 9-win season, which, hell, if you're able to do that, I mean, you talk about the world being your oyster at that point. Let's start there. 4-0. What needs to happen for something like that to go down?
Well, that would put them at 9-3, and honestly, that would have surpassed my preseason expectations. So to me, that's a pretty good season. I mean, you're still looking. Texas fans are going to focus on a couple tough losses and what could have been, but 9-3 would still be a pretty good season, especially coming off of last season's disaster. But what needs to happen, I think, really boils down to 2 things for me. Quinn Ewers has to be good. Quinn Ewers, I hate to say he was bad. Quinn Ewers, I don't want to put that label on him, but he didn't play well against Oklahoma State. Texas still almost found a way to win the game, but we've got to see Quinn Ewers be the good Quinn Ewers that we've seen against Oklahoma. We've seen first quarter against Alabama was fantastic. So we know it's in there, but he has to be consistently good. It can't be this up and down roller coaster ride over the next 4 weeks. They're going to run the ball well. That from week to week. But we need Quinn Ewers to be Quinn Ewers if we're going to see 4-0 from Texas. And defensively, I don't know that they have to be world beaters. I think that this defense just continues to play, at the level pretty close to what it has played. I mean, it's been dominant some weeks, and there have been times where it's been down. But overall, I think the defense has played well enough to, if it can just kind of maintain that level, that it could not carry this team, but it could be a part of this team going 4-0 down the stretch. But ultimately, for me, so much in college football comes down to quarterback play, Anwar, in college football more probably than any other level. So I think we've got to see Quinn Ewers play at a pretty high level, consistently high level, and not have any stinkers like he did Oklahoma State, not get hurt, of course. Quinn Ewers is going to have to lead the charge for this team to go 4-0.
Alex, before I get into your thoughts on the 4-0, what would need to happen, when you watched it, and I know you analyzed every portion and aspect of that film, how bad was the Quinn Ewers performance when you went back and looked at it? I know you wasn't necessarily grading him, but as you were grading other people, obviously you had to have seen it multiple times.
Yeah, I mean, it's not any breaking news that he was bad. He was bad. He was missing guys. He was missing open guys. He was making the wrong reads. He was making throws he shouldn't making throws he shouldn't have thrown. He didn't have the same spin on the ball. I don't have a magic answer. I don't think Sark has a magic answer. And I even said after that game, I was like, people asked me on the board, would you have taken him out and put in Card? I said no. I said I would leave him in there and hope he becomes Quinn again. And comes and saves the day. It's like at the end of the game, I really think, man, that holding penalty on Christian Jones, right at the very end of the game, that negated the long run that seemed like Quinn was starting to spark it. He's a gamer, dude. He gets in the flow of these games, even despite the fact that he was getting these vibes. I told you guys in Slack, I hated the turtled up vibes that Sark was just giving with his body language at the end of that game. The players mirror that kind of stuff. Quinn was doing everything he could not to. He was. It felt like he was coming into something there at the very end. That thing was just such a backbreaker. That long run was negated. It felt like such a momentum killer. So I'm look. There's been all the talk about the fingernail and the pinky and all or whatever on the forefinger and everything like that. I think Quinn Ewers is awesome, man. He's really exceeded my expectations this year as far as just the prospect that he looks like, just the gift that he has as far as just driving the football, the arm strength, the natural level of talent, the way that he doesn't let things really get to him, short memory. All those things are things I didn't necessarily know about his profile and stuff coming out, just having watched his highlights and having seen him. But he's a gamer. And if he could just be himself, he wasn't himself in that Kansas State game. I'm not sure we'll ever know exactly why not. Or I'm sorry, in the Oak State game. I'm not sure that we'll ever know exactly why not. But if he can just avoid that, right? If he can just avoid that malaise and be the Quinn Ewers that we saw in the first part of the Alabama game, certainly the guy that we saw in the Oklahoma game, I think that would go a long way. I think on defense, Texas needs to be able to react to what teams are going to do to them using the Oklahoma State playbook by just getting those bunch sets on the side with the wide receivers, spreading Texas out so wide, waiting for linebackers to cheat out to the flats, and then gashing up the middle. And that dude, Deuce Vaughn is a menace to see behind those big offensive linemen coming right up at you. He can get, you can get real lost looking for that guy. And then once he's up on you, he's tough. He's tough to deal with. Just because he's small doesn't mean he's not tough to deal with. And so I worry a little bit about that. I worry a little bit about them using that against Texas and Texas speed at linebacker. I mean, there were all the people that gave me the trouble for calling, Tucker Dorsey. Whenever he came to Texas, I don't care what anybody said. What the book was on him was speed, right? Sideline to sideline demon. That's what he looked like at James Madison. I understand he's not the speed specialist that Texas was hoping, but that was certainly kind of what he was brought in to be. Texas has a little bit of a lack of speed at linebacker. They've played well at linebacker. Jalen Ford's been a good volume guy. They have a little bit of a lack of speed. And, if teams continue to expose that by doing the stuff that Oklahoma State did, it really opens things up for the seam routes, the deep routes down the middle, and just for these running backs to come up, man, and just spit out on you. So I would just say if they can get the defense ready to not be exploited in those same kind of ways, Quinn can play better. There's really not that many, I think that, if you could deal with the loss of Anthony Cook to some relatively minor degree, those are the two main things that I'm most worried about. I'm worried about whether Quinn can do it and the defensive scheme, whether or not it's going to be one that's going to be exploited in similar ways moving forward.
When you launched it, Alex, and we'll still get to that 4-0 conversation, but kind of staying where you're at, and Paul, don't worry, we'll get to your super chat in a second. How much of that is it? Do you put on that zone coverage that they run a lot, and how much of it is just a lack of execution and missed tackles?
I'm sorry. What is the what was? I said,
how much do you put on like zone coverage when you see that out there, as far as like the defensive struggle, the Texas defense struggling, and how much do you put on is just the lack of execution as far as tackling is concerned from the players?
Well, I mean, versus Oklahoma State, it was the lack of execution and the missed. I mean, you missed 26 tackles. You're not executing. They missed 26 tackles. I mean, there's only the only game where they play the only game where they missed a tackle at a greater rate per snap during Sark and PK's whole career at Texas was the Arkansas game. It was the most missed tackles in a game, but they played 96 snaps on defense, which is too many snaps to play on defense for this. That's another thing. No more of these 96 plays on defense stuff. This is not only for my own sanity and having to chart every single one, but it's just never any good to get in that spot, even when you can substitute guys in and stuff. That's gonna wear on you for sure.
All right, so going to the 4-0, what is that kind of it for you, Alex? And to finish 4-0 over the next 4, those are the things you say you have to and improve. It's kind of all that the defense
and Bert Auburn needs to he needs to make it every time he's down there within 40 yards. He needs to make it every time he's within 40.
Let's go to a 3-1 kind of scenario. Okay, first of all, do any of you think that is your most realistic scenario by any chance?
Hey, I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Just real
forgot
quick.
about the super chat. Okay.
As it pertains to this, how much did it change your calculus on this Kansas State game that it's being played at night? I know. I mean, did it make any difference to you? When I heard that, I got a little bit more. For some reason, it made me a little bit more queasy about it. But is that completely irrational?
No. What about you, Jason? Not for me.
I don't know.
I told it. No, I agree with you, Alex. By the way, I agree with you. I know sometimes no means yes. I mean, yes, queasy. Well, I'm thinking night game, probably colder. That kind of, maybe there's doing some sort of whiteout thing, like prime time.
See like an actual study though. We all have this kind of idea, like we talked about Lubbock. Oh, Lubbock at night's crazy.
Yeah, I know.
And I don't know. Is there really any truth? I think the crowd's probably more lathered up, and that plays a part of it. But I don't know that for the teams, it really their true execution that makes that much of a difference. I guess a difference. Yeah, I mean, I guess a little bit, but I feel like our minds are playing tricks on us a little bit too.
Yeah.
I don't know that if we actually did a study of night games versus 2:30 and 11 a.m. kicks, I don't know that there would be that much difference. All told, if we added them all up. But yeah, I do think, just in my mind, you're right, Alex. It just kind of becomes a little more tricky with a night game.
Hey, Blake, before I go to the 3-1 scenario, give me the super chat question again. Sorry, I just killed this damn gnat that was bugging the hell out of me. But, Paul has put $9.99 in a super chat. He goes, "How much do you guys really think Quinn's finger was an issue at Oklahoma State?" What about you, Jason? I'll start with you. Do you think that was an issue? And not to be fair, he did start messing with a glove beforehand. Mm-hmm. He did have his, he hasn't played a ton of games, but it was his worst game so far. Do you think, how much of an issue do you think it was?
First off, in the chat, someone said Ghetto Boys because I said mine is playing tricks on me. Tim, don't think I don't know Ghetto Boys and Bushwick, Bill. Come on, man. Yeah, that's right. But the questions from my dude Paul, a buddy of mine. Paul, you can just text me that question, man. Save your money. But I don't know. Almar, I want to hear your answer to this. My honest answer, I think it probably did because he just looked so off. But I had another buddy text me about that. And I was like, was something wrong? This is kind of before it come out. I was like, I don't know. I mean, there's rumors about this, but I just thought he was off at that point. But now that you kind of hear the talk about it and like that he was dealing with it all week, and it was painful. I mean, his throws, and it was windy. You got to remember there was a pretty strong wind, but I got to think it did play a factor to some degree. But Don, my honest answer is I just don't know the answer. Pure speculation. I'm more curious to hear on what you have to say on it.
So there's a couple of things that I will say why I think it had an effect. There's two things that stand out to me. That first of all, his performance. So then there'll be three, right? And that was so un-Quinn-like that you have to say, okay, something else had to be going on. Two, here's the one thing we know about Sarkisian, especially as relates to his quarterback. He's not a guy that wants to talk about injuries, and he definitely won't use injuries as an excuse. Remember, Alex, remember Casey Thompson's hand last year, and what that photo came out, and what that looked like, if that's what he was throwing with. But no matter what, Sarkisian was not about to say, anything as far as that hand is concerned. And we know when you saw the pictures, you go, oh, Well, that explains a lot as to why that guy may have struggled last season. Doesn't explain anything about this year, but as relates to last year, that's in there. And you know what? And you guys remember, you guys have listened to every Stark press conference. You remember he said something several weeks ago when he started to talk about injured players. He doesn't like to play guys who haven't practiced because he said it kind of starts to get into their head, the injury, and then they start kind of thinking about it and overcompensating about it and things to that effect. There was something specific to that. I'm paraphrasing, but it's very possible that because of the injury and because it was in his head, because he was with the glove, that it was a compound of that it was, injuries / mental, because of the finger. So I think the finger played a part, in it for sure. And for me, I would say so. How huge? Now that's the determining factor. We don't know if that's 100% all on the finger. Is it 85%? Is it 50%? Like, they just get in his head. But I definitely think the finger played a part. Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I'm not inside the guy's head. I'm not inside his body. I don't think we'll ever know the exact extent, but it obviously has something to do with it. And we had information that we had information that it had something to do with it. How much it had to do with it? I mean, I don't know. I would venture to guess it's probably, he looks substantially worse. Mm-hmm. So is it the wind? Is it is it the fact they're on the road? Was he messed up in the head? Like, I don't know. It was certainly something that contributed.
Yeah, Sark shot it down pretty quickly after the game when he's like, nope, wasn't a factor, or something like that. But which almost makes me think, okay, it was a little bit of a factor. And like, listen, man, I've never played quarterback at the college level, but just played a little bit in middle school and just go out and throwing the ball around. It's kind of like playing basketball. I mean, dude, you got like a jammed finger on your shooting hand or your throwing hand or a fingernail issue as it was. I mean, the littlest thing, there's such fine margins there where it's going to throw you off just a little bit, man. Your accuracy. So I don't see how it didn't play a factor to some degree, but could he have still played better through it? Yeah, I think even Quinn would say, hey, fingernail or no fingernail or missing a whole finger, yeah, I should have still played better than I did.
But look, this is the same coach, right? That he's talking about Anthony Cook, even with a broken arm. He's like, well, I've seen guys play before. You're like, wait a second. So there is a part that we have to acknowledge that there may be a thing with the Sark and just injuries that unless it is something substantial, unless you're on life support. And even then, if a guy's on life support, Sark might be like, well, he was breathing today, so there's a chance he might play on Saturday. Like, I just think when it comes to injuries, I think everything Sark says you got to take. Thanks, Jay, but you got to take it with a grain of salt, just because of that. Okay, so we got all super chats done. Let's go to 3 and 1.
I think there was another. I'm sorry, but
did we? Was there another one?
Chat in there? Yeah, $20 one.
Oh, here we go. Where do each of you stand in your long-term confidence of each coach, PK and Stark? Can you just do that real quick? Don't go too far. I want to go too far off topic. So
we do have another super chat, $20 one from Eric Torres.
Okay.
Listen, my long-term confidence of each coach, I'm still very confident. I mean, those guys didn't forget football, and I mean, if you guys have followed me and listened to me going back to like our podcast, I think it was before we were doing modcast. I'm a huge Sarkisian fan, just from an offensive mind standpoint. Always have been. Just like I have a man crush on Lincoln Riley. I have a man crush on Oklahoma State's Coach Gundy, just because I think offensively those guys are so smart. I still feel the same way about Sark, but I'd be lying if I didn't say he hasn't quite lived up to my expectations as an offensive playing caller and as in terms of adjustments and just things kind of bogging down in the second half. But have I lost confidence in him? No, not at all. I still have confidence in him and PK both. You,
Alex?
Oh, I'm probably a little bit more tepid than Jason, but I mean, I'm not taking out a pitchfork to go fire the guys or anything. I mean, they've been great. Steve Sarkisian and his staff are great recruiters. At the point in time where the play on the actual football field makes it to where they can't recruit the way that they've been recruiting, then you say, well, what exactly do we have here, right? What are we building here now? right? Right now, it feels like something's being built. You got Quinn, you got Arch in the pipe. You got a bunch of great offensive linemen. I mean, there are a lot of things to point to and say, well, look, the product on the field right now isn't exactly what you want, but look, I mean, we're building towards something. You can see right here, these are really good players, right? So we're building towards that. Would you have liked it to be, these guys just comes in and wins 10 games with people he inherited because his scheme looks just like it did at Alabama? Like, well, of course. So for me, long term, I'm probably a little bit more tepid, but I think they're great recruiters. I think they're building towards something right now. Now, the fact of the matter is, I mean, if they lose, if they lose out or something down the stretch, or they only win one game, how does that affect recruiting? And then all of a sudden, do you still have the guys on board that you thought you did? And are you asking yourself, well, what exactly are we building toward here? Mm-hmm. Then it becomes more of an issue and more of a problem.
Yeah, for me, guys, when he talks about like long-term confidence, I'm just going to keep it real. Like, it's still always been for me, like, I need to see it to believe it as relates to, Sarkisian. Like, look, at the end of the day, we know what his record was in Washington. I don't really count the, Nick Saban assistant things. There's plenty of guys who've been assistants who've been coordinators. And Charlie Strong won a damn national championship, okay, with Urban Meyer. So I'm not, what someone did under a GOAT is not necessarily something that I just, it's not like Alabama's falling apart. Alabama was clicking before him. They're clicking after him. They're fine. So I still want to see it. Like, I still want to see it. Do I think he's a great recruiter? Absolutely. Do I feel like he's put in a lot of good pieces in place? Like, absolutely. Love what he's doing from an offensive line perspective. They're building some components on the defensive line, like, for sure. But, to Alice's point, like, we have to see where this team looks after the next 4 games, which is kind of where we're heading right now. We got to see what this looks like. Like, you can't sit here and start talking about confidence when, we're talking about a coach who's 1-6 on the road. Like, what are you basing this off of? Like, there's still more to prove here. Like, I think the danger where everyone has to be careful is that there's always been this, like, an instant, like, anointing of Sark, and as opposed to saying, like, okay, let's just see what he does before you 100% crown him. Oh, give me the last super chat one. My man El Presidente, 4-0 complimentary football is the offense helping the defense by producing points and preferably some possession time, while the defense does its part by getting the ball back on 3 and outs or with turnovers. Just
it's also. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
No, go ahead. You're good.
Well, it's also just about, like, if they're not out there quite as much, they're more fresh, and also they have the pressure off of them and the coaches have the pressure off of them to where these guys can pin their ears back and go after dudes. You know what I mean? So it's like, you always talk about the complimentary football, and coaches love talking about complimentary football because basically what you're saying is, all right, I want the offense to play well and I want the defense to play well. When both play well, we're going to win the damn football game because they feed off. Like, of course. I mean, what complimentary football is the offense playing well that benefits the defense, and it in turn plays well, and vice versa. So of course, what anybody would want is teams to play complimentary football.
100%, Alex. So thanks, El Presidente. By the way, I was looking up your number, but then I realized I was in the car and I shouldn't be doing that. So I'll get with you this week about the other stuff that we talked about on this past week. So don't worry, you'll be hearing from me either today or tomorrow. 3-1. Okay, either one of you have that as your realistic scenario. I feel like I tried to ask this 20 minutes ago.
I think it's very real. You did. You started on it, and then you got sidetracked
a few times. So 3.
I'm not predicting it necessarily, Anwar, just because I just don't think the facts back it up. I mean, there's a good chance all 4 of these games are going to be 1-score games. I mean, literally, maybe that come down to the wire. I mean, they're all going to be pretty tight point spreads coming in. But I would lean more 3-1 than I would 1-3, despite this team's kind of struggles on the road. I still have faith in this team. Weirdly, I think this team still hasn't played its best football. And I think we haven't seen it like really just hit on all cylinders when everybody's healthy. We've seen flashes of it. I mean, you could say Oklahoma, but I'm almost throwing that game out, man. Oklahoma was just junk that weekend. They were trash that weekend. So, But yeah, I think 3-1 is absolutely possible. I think the complimentary football from was spot on. I mean, they've got to do that. They've got to get off the field on third downs and fourth downs. That's something this team has struggled with in games where it hasn't performed well. Sustainable drives, absolutely. Give its defense some rest, but that's a big part of it. Eric's point about complimentary football, we hear Sark say it a lot. That's a term we hear a lot in coaching talks nowadays, coaching press conferences. But it is true. I mean, if Texas can play complimentary football, just play sound football, not give the game away, not make bad mistakes on offense and turn the ball over, get off the field on third or fourth down at a decent rate, then absolutely. I think 3-1 is very possible. And I'd probably lean 3-1 before I would 1-3.
Alex, 3-1.
Yeah.
When I say that, what does that do for you?
Like I said earlier, well, it means, like I said earlier, I think it's the second most likely outcome behind 2-2. And I think that would be something that, like I said, I don't think the fans would feel like it's the banana in the old tailpipe or Lucy in the old football all over again. I mean, 3-1 feels like, all right, like I'm not having to talk myself in to just believing this team is actually better and actually progressing or have to do these mental gymnastics. At that point, you say, like, well, look, this is a good team that can go on to a decent, not a New Year's Day bowl, but a bowl where it's like, it's around Christmas time and it's one that gets a lot of eyeballs. You could be playing against some good SEC team, something like that, right? Texas, I mean, if Texas wins 7 games in the regular season, they're going to be going down to Houston and playing that. What is that? The Texas Bowl?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're going to be heading down there. Like, Anwar's going to make his annual trip down to Houston, try and talk somebody into giving him some barbecue and everything else.
Steak. I got the steak dinner there the last time, so I'm not actually too upset about potentially going back. No, to be quite honest with you.
That's what comes to mind. That's what I feel like when I hear 3-1. I feel like it's a big deal, man, to go 3-1 and it's instead of 2-2 if both those things are on the menu here that we're discussing.
Well, here, the other part about 3-1, Alex, is that would mean that Texas got a road victory. Against one of them. One of them, because there's only 2 home games. Right. So, so that means they either got a road win against Kansas State, which would be the huge one, or at least getting the road win against Kansas. But yeah, to be able to close that out, like I said, 8-4 is kind of where I think all of us were at before the season. Jason, were you at 8-4 before the season? Was that your prediction?
I was 8-4, yeah.
Yeah, Alex, you too? Were you at 8-4?
I kind of think we all were, weren't we? I kind of think that's where we all ended up.
Yeah, I think that feels about accurate. And so 3 out of the next 4 will put us right at that 8-4 mark with the potential going for. But winning 3 out of your last 4 compared to how they closed out the season last year, at that point, there's certain things that I think you could tell yourself, as a Texas fan, right? And it's kind of what I alluded to in the question that I was asking today. But then when you go into the offseason and you want to pour the burnt orange, you can say, well, it was only 1 point versus Bama. Bijan fumbles. Like, how likely is that to happen? Texas Tech was, Oklahoma State was only 7. Like, you can talk yourself into it. Now, the one loss better not be something like an ass kicking, right? You don't want TCU to come in here and drag you, right?
Man. It feels really bad for that guy to come because, dude, I get from Dykes, man, I know it's like, I'm not comparing him to Bob Stoops or anything like that, but man, the way he walks around on the sideline, the way he holds himself, the way he's just like, he's puffed up, dude, chest out, so confident. Man, he's a ball coach, dude. I watched that guy play, man. It reminds you, just pucker up a little bit, man. It reminds you a little bit of Stoops. Like, yeah. I think you do not want that. You do not want that dude coming in and just going alpha mode on you and your own, peeing all over your rug in your own house. It's like it would be humiliating.
Yeah, one of the things I noted in my column, Alex, and I moved to the other scenario. The one thing that's impressive about him is, this is catches in on here, but you guys know I'm a little bit more reserved when it comes to recruiting rankings. I don't really get as overboard with that because I always say go back to coaching matters. I think it matters, and I look at a case like Dykes where we're not talking about how he needs to bring in 5 stars and 4 stars to be successful. How he's not talking about how he needs to bring in his guys, right? We're not talking about how long it's going to take to establish his own culture. Like the things that we use in our bingo card here to explain away the lack of success. Some coaches just come in and just do the damn thing, and then they say, "All right, I got a 5-win team. I'll just turn this shit around." And you don't need all these other, I don't need a bunch of 5 stars high 4 stars to do it. Dave Aranda's like the same thing. Year 2, I'm like, all right, I'll just turn around this team and win the Big 12 championship. So guys like that are kind of why sometimes when we start talking about rankings, I just go a shoulder shrug. I'm like, can they coach? Like, that's all I want to know. Like, this sounds great, but can you coach?
Dykes has done it everywhere he's gone, I think, too, man. So
I'm
a big Dykes fan, dude. I really am. Yeah,
he's pretty damn good. 2-2 over the next ones. And by the way, Jason, did you say 3-1 was your most realistic scenario? Did you? Or
no, 2-2 is my most.
Okay,
2-2 is my most realistic.
I think that's where all of us are going to probably be right now. So, Alex, I'll start with you. 2-2 over the next ones. Tell me who you think the two wins would like.
See, that's what's tough, Anwar. That's what's tough. It's going back to old David Williams in the chat earlier. It's like, you can only stay focused on the game ahead of you, like it matters for us. But I mean, for this exercise, it kind of does matter, because I would say I would generally say that it would be TCU and Kansas State, right? Having to go to Kansas State, go to on the road at night to a ranked team, that just demolished the team that just beat you. The team that just beat you, they just put up 48-0. And I know the transitive property does. I wrote this today. The transitive property doesn't exist in college football, right? It doesn't. It's not. Let's say like
but a 49-0 win or whatever. That's pretty damn.
Yeah, it's just like what I'm saying is like. Just because Team X beats Team Y and Team Y beats Team Z, it doesn't mean that Team X is going to beat Team Z, right? Like that's just not how it works in football. Yeah. But it's kind of, I mean, it's something. I mean, it's something. They just beat those guys 48-0 with a backup quarterback. So that's tough, dude. And it's been one true road win for Sark. So I mean, it's going to be tough, man. I couldn't believe Texas is favored by 2.5 points in this game. And I'm going to do Texas a big favor in our predictions this week. And I think I'm probably going to pick them to lose. And that'll just be that'll be the kiss of death for Kansas State, and Texas will go win, right? But if I'm picking it, it's like, and so if that happens, they lose in that game, then they got to go back and then they got to play TCU. That feels like so if in a situation where they lose those 2 games, do you guys really see this as a Texas team that's going to come back and win the last 2? So the 2-2 to me all of a sudden feels like, it feels like the most easy thing to say, but how do we get there? How do we get there? Do we get there by them losing 2 and winning 2, or do we think they're going to overachieve and win one of these other games and then let one of these games down that they probably should win with Baylor or KU down the stretch? So the more I think of it, it's like, what is 2-2 really the most likely? Is 3-1 or 1-3 more likely than 2-2? Because how do we get to 2-2? Jason, how do we get to 2-2?
Well, how you get to 2-2 is a team that's wildly inconsistent, which is what we've seen from half to half, week to week sometimes. So, but you're right. If they lose these first 2 games, which are the 2 toughest games, obviously, 2-2 ain't happening, man. I don't think this team bounces back. They'd be then sitting at 5-5, right? I don't think this team wins the final 2 to get to 7-5. I think morale would be pretty low if they lose to Kansas State and TCU. But how do you get to And listen, Texas could beat any team on the schedule by a couple scores. Texas could lose to any team on the schedule by a couple scores. This Texas team's been pretty inconsistent, pretty up and down, including on the road. So how do you get to 2-2? You keep playing pretty inconsistent football and probably split one of these first 2 and then split one of the last 2.
I'm like David Williams here. This is hard to figure out, because to me now I'm almost changing my thing to where it's like, I think 1-3 and or 3-1 is the most likely. 2-2 is, they're tied for the most. 2-2 I think is less likely, because I just don't know how I'm having a hard time putting it together in my mind how they would get to 2-2, how these games would play out, how this run out would occur to where that would happen.
I mean, it's tough because so right now, again, we're sitting here, we're entitled to be wrong. We would probably all peg TCU as a loss, right?
I'm
Probably,
I'm
but
more
it's at
likely to peg
home
Kansas State as a loss. I mean, it was Kansas State at night on the road, a ranked team. I mean, we would be giving an awful lot of credit to this team for doing something that they've done one time out of 7.
I mean, TCU didn't exactly beat up on West Virginia last week, right?
No.
I mean, Kansas, they won by 7. I mean, Kansas was really good back then. I mean, SMU was an 8-point win. I mean, this is a TCU team that's ranked, what, 7th in the country, did I say?
Yes,
I think?
7th. Correct.
That's a very beatable TCU team. I don't want to say they're not worthy of the number 7 ranking because they're undefeated, right? You can't take that away from them. But this is a very beatable TCU team. I mean, Texas could beat TCU at home for sure.
Well, yeah, because now where I would say, TCU hasn't necessarily been blowing the doors off for someone. Like we haven't seen TCU performance like we saw from a Kansas State performance standpoint, right? If I go back, they beat Kansas as I go through their, the probably best win was probably against OU, 55-24. They beat Kansas 38-31. They go into double overtime versus Oklahoma State and pull out that win 43-40. There is that 38-28 win versus K-State, and of course 41-31. To your point, Jason, it's not like they've gone in and just said to wow. So look at the team.
They've come from behind in a lot of those games, Omar.
But they have come from behind, and they do have a good quarterback, right? And they've got some good guys at the skill position, which makes a huge difference as well. But they do got the quarterback that he can go at any point. Did you see that last play of the game for them? Did you watch? You didn't watch a TCU. Did you watch a TCU game, Alex?
I was that the Quentin Johnston play? I didn't.
Yeah.
I think I saw. I was on radio. I saw the highlights of it. I saw.
It was
like play.
Jason. It was like 4th and short with just not a ton of time left, and I think there's maybe like in they throw a touchdown pass like 20-something yards, 30-something yards, or like whatever it was. It was something I had never seen before. I'm going to find it for you.
Well, I'm looking 29-yard pass with 20 seconds left to Savion Williams. I did not see that. No, I'm sorry. That's a TCU score. Wait, no, I'm looking at the wrong thing. No, that is okay. Yeah, I'm over. I'm sorry. TCU with 20 seconds left had a 29-yard touchdown pass.
Yes, and it's like 4th and short. So it was one of the most odd things I had ever seen. So that actually added to the score to make it a little bit, everyone. The theory was somebody had something on that game because there was no need to throw that pass at all.
Yeah, 4th and 1. You're right. 4th and 1. Sure. To
your point, that TCU at home probably looks like you could tell yourself that's so I hear exactly what you're saying. So but it's interesting, Alice, because you've shifted with a 3-1 and 1-3 as your most likely scenarios, because 2-2 just seems a little bit too middle of the road for you, is what you're saying.
No, I have with the way the scenarios can play out. The only way that I can see that playing out is if Texas goes 2-2. So I would peg one of the losses to be K-State, and I would obviously peg the other loss to be, I know it's at home and it's TCU and it's winnable, but they are undefeated. They are number 7 in the nation. They're a good football team. I mean, Jesus, it's the number 7 team in the nation. I mean, that's probably a game that I would imagine even the sports books would be picking TCU to win. So those are what I feel like are the most likely two. I think Texas. I don't think Baylor has looked very good this year. Kansas, I refuse to believe that they've turned any kind of major corner as far as the athletes they have. So I think that they could win those. I think that they could win those, but I just wonder if you go on a 2-game loss streak right now that I would be predicting to get to 2-2. What's the morale of the team? What's the motivation of the team? What is on a short week going to play Baylor, and there's Thanksgiving that's that people are thinking about and the distractions around that. I just wonder if it's a spot where you end up maybe not getting but one of those games. For me it just seems more likely that maybe you lose one of these first two and then win out, or you lose these first two and only win one of the remaining two. That to me feels more likely than a scenario that I can dream up where they win 2 and lose 2.
When you were talking, I just kind of went and looked and to see if Catch's guy was back. The Kansas quarterback Jalen Daniels. They said that just an article posted not too long ago on the what is this KU Sports? I think it's the Kansas City Star, if I'm actually being correct, or just KU Sports. KU Sports. I don't want it to be disrespectful, and then it's something totally different. Anyway, they said Jalen Daniels practiced today.
He's back. He'll be back for Texas.
So I was going to say, does that change, even if he's not, he's trending in the right direction to play against Texas. So does that change your point of view, Jason? If Daniels is back and Texas has to go on the road and he's there, does that do anything for you from a win-loss perspective?
It should, but for some reason it doesn't. I still think it's Kansas. I know it's on the road. I'm looking. Kansas hosts Oklahoma State this week. Oklahoma State's only 2.5-point favorite. That tells me probably Jalen Daniels are expecting to play this week. No, Omar, it really doesn't change much because I think these games, literally all 4 of them, everything I've been saying, I've been expecting Daniels to play, but I think all 4 of these games are going to be really close games, man. I mean, even without Daniels, I still think that would probably be a pretty close game. So, yes, it makes Kansas a more tricky game on the road with Jalen Daniels playing, but he had kind of come down to earth a little bit before he got hurt too. But it doesn't really move the needle too much for me because I think regardless, I think these are all 4 going to be really close competitive football games.
All right, so Alex, you've kind of touched on 1 and 3, so let me just do the last scenario, and then I want to ask Jason a recruiting question, and then we'll just go ahead and get out of here. 0 and 4, clearly doomsday, right? That anything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. You don't see that possibility at all, do you? Did any of you guys see them just losing out by any stretch of the imagination, or is that just not only just bad mojo to talk about, but just unrealistic for it to happen?
I'd say it's a 15% chance. I mean, 15% chance of losing out, probably 15% chance of winning out. Probably 25% chances each of 1 and 3 and 3 and 1, and what does that leave me? 20% chance of 2 and 2. Did I add those up right?
No,
did I have 10 extra points?
Yeah, I feel like you had a little bit extra. So let me
I'll say a 10% chance of losing out, a 10% chance of winning out, 15, 25, 80. So 80 plus a total of 50. So 15 losing out, 15 winning out, 25 1 and 3, 25 3 and 1, 20 2 and 2.
What did you just say?
Oh my God!
We just went into the mind of Alex and got really lost. But I see we're just joking, Alex. I know you're. What about you, Jason?
It's possible. I'm not going to do all the numbers because that'd make my head explode. But when Alex said 15%, that's about what I'd put it. I mean, it's possible. Listen, if they lose to K-State, then lose to TCU, those are both good teams. You can understand it, right? Mm-hmm. At Kansas is not an easy win by any means. We saw them lose to Kansas last year rather. So if Texas goes 0-3, I think this Texas team probably mails it in against Baylor. If they go 0-3, then they're going 0-4 in my mind. Yeah. So they got to break that streak or break that 3-game stretch up with a win in there somewhere. But is it possible? Absolutely, it's possible.
What about this? How does this conversation change if we're talking about Texas going into Kansas State and rolling them?
Sure.
Then
more of a possibility.
And then you start saying, 4-0. That goes from being a 10-15% chance to where you're talking now 35% chance of something like that, because they would have shown that they can go win on the road. They would have shown that they can go beat a highly ranked opponent, and you would just figure it's like, all right, man, maybe they got steam and the mojo back at that. Man, this is such a critical game coming up. It really is just a critical game.
I mean, no, you're 100% right. And look, if they won by 2 touchdowns or something to that effect, Alex, like you're 100% correct. And then let me ask you this. I think it's the same question that Ketch may have asked us like last week, but I thought it's still interesting. If it's the middle of the third quarter and Texas is leading 31-17, are you at the point where you're like, hey, here we go, this Texas win is guaranteed, or you just have to sit back and you're not even trying to finish writing anything because you just don't know if this team can hold on?
Finish writing? Oh, so we're getting a little peek behind the curtain here about how the sausage gets made for all you beat writers, huh? You start to write like before the game's even over, I guess.
No, there's a little bit. Yeah. There's a little pre-writing that goes on.
A little bit of
better than a blowout win, right, Elmo? When you're in that press box, or even me like sitting at home, like
a little bit of process talk there, huh? You kind of get that done and go grab some old fashions a little bit early. Man, I don't know, dude. For me, dude. At this point, I would say that if they're ahead 31-17, and it depends on where we're on. Are we talking like the quarter just flipped over? We got 15.00 on that thing, or are we talking like 7:30 on that thing?
What's the difference for you in your mind?
Well, it's at 7:30. I don't think I would be particularly worried. I think with a full 15 minutes, I think that's enough time for a lot of teams to do some damage for sure.
I mean more so like heading into the fourth quarter. Yeah. We still say, shit. Let's just see if this team can close out. Okay, so the last thing on that one, Jason, 0-4 Doomsday, small percentage, but not a huge percentage. In your mind, the smallest of all of them would be that one. So I think, for the most part, I think we're all kind of in like that 2-2, kind of 3-1 range, which is kind of interesting. But for our purposes, rooting for 4-0 so we can have an easy time on the board, right?
And an easy time with my home life, dude. I mean, geez, dude, I have a whole family full of rabid Longhorn fans in here.
Yes. All right. Let me ask Jason. I'm gonna ask one recruiting question, then close out the super chats, and then I'll let you go because I think you're probably starving at this moment. Jason, someone did ask about this earlier, and so I figure it's probably newsy. Cedric Baxter, the Texas commit who, Charlie Strong, I think, phrased it the best way when he talked about guys making reservations. Like, that thing has always stuck with me, and it seemed to be so true. And then, we heard the rumblings of maybe, I think he took a visit to Florida. Florida before Florida State, he took an unofficial to Florida, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Yes. I keep up with recruiting.
Florida kids, Anwar.
Okay, Florida kids. But the Florida thing was interesting to me because the distance from where he lives there is probably like an hour and change to the house. And then you said to yourself, okay, well, of course he's going to take that. And he goes. Then he announced on Twitter that he was going to visit Florida State, which I thought was really interesting that he announced it, because a lot of guys just show up and do it. He announced it like, hey, just so let the world know I'm going to Florida State. Give me the vibes of what's coming out of that Florida State visit, and should Texas be concerned at all that he still seems a little bit open for business?
Well, he's always kind of maintained that he would be a little bit. He did take an unofficial visit to Florida State a couple weeks ago, and then last week, like you said, he was there on an official visit. So, normally kids announce their official visits, maybe not every unofficial visit. Hey, I'm just going to watch a game or something like that. But the fact that he's been there, I think it's 2 out of 3 weeks now. That should be alarming for Texas fans. Listen, Cole Patterson from Orangebloods and myself, we have independent sources on this. One's very close with Cedric. The other person I talked to is close with Cedric and people in his family and stuff. They both repeatedly just keep telling us, hey, Texas has nothing to worry about. He's taking these unofficial visits because he's injured. He's not playing anyway. They're on a bye week. He went and watched Florida State and Clemson. The Florida game, I don't recall off the top of my head who they played, but it was a big game. I'd have to pull up their schedule. I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. It was early in the season. Utah, I believe,
Yep, you're right. It was a Utah game. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So the way it was termed to me is like, hey man, he just, it's close. It's easy to get to. He's not playing here recently, so what else is he doing on the weekend? So he's just going to watch football games. Now, taking an official visit, that's always a little bit more of a red flag if you're a Texas fan and one of your guys is taking an official visit to a school, because they get wined and dined and family gets to go and all this stuff. What I can tell you as of Monday morning, and I want to keep digging around on this, people are still saying, people in Orlando are like, hey, Texas is nothing to worry about. He's still solid with Texas. Did Florida State help themselves in that official? Absolutely. Ultimately, I think it's going to come down to a couple of things. I think how Texas finishes the season, and probably Florida State to some degree too. And it's kind of the word or the phrase people don't want to talk about a lot, but I think it's going to come down to NIL opportunities. When you're talking about out-of-state elite talent like this. Listen, if he can go to Florida State and stay in state and someone promises him these great opportunities, then they're going to be tough to fend off. Texas has its own NIL opportunities. We know that. You can't sign them to a deal, of course, but those conversations there's ways those conversations can be had. If he knows he can come to Texas and get a good NIL deal, it's probably as good or better than Florida State. I don't think Texas has a lot to be worried about right now, but man, we're it's about a month, almost 2 still months from early signing period. So there's a lot of time for movement in these things. But right now, I would say Texas certainly has the advantage to hold on to his commitment and get his signature.
Yes, but to your point, the more he's visiting, the more he still keep opening himself up to that.
Yeah,
it's kind of like
sorry to cut you off, Omar. The good thing for Texas is for Texas fans, he is going to get back to playing, maybe even this week. I need to check in with his coach or with Cedric and or people down there in Orlando. If he can get back to playing, if his team goes on a playoff run like people think they're capable of, that really cuts in his opportunities to take more official visits. That's why he took this Florida State visit when he did, because they're on a bye week. I think he's been injured. So the timing of it added up. So you need Cedric Baxter to get back on the field. You need his team to go on a deep playoff run. That cuts into his opportunities for official visits to other schools like Texas A&M, some of these other been recruiting.
But the familiarity with the Florida schools is probably has to be at something at play, right? Because at this point,
he was committed to Florida State at one point.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of familiarity there. Excuse me.
And then, I mean, at that point, Jason, we know Trey Wisner is already committed. At that point, is there anybody else? If for some reason he, decides, hey, I'm going to go somewhere else, are there backup options? Because Ruben Owens, was kind of seemed to be like option number one, and then the Louisville thing happens, and then Cedric, you could say 1A, 1B. I understand when teams lose out on someone, it's like, oh, that next guy was always better than the first guy, but he seemed to be the guy that they kind of zeroed in on next, and then got him. Then what happens if something the unforeseen, the worst case scenario happens?
They'd be in a real pinch because right now there are no other realistic candidates. Nobody they've really offered. They'd have to dig around and find some guys. And there's always going to be running back talent in the state of Texas. They could try to flip somebody. Not anybody anywhere near Cedric Baxter's caliber, though. I'm not convinced Cedric Baxter might not be the best running back in the country, for being honest. I think he's that good. Rivals doesn't view him that way in the rankings, and I don't quite understand. I think they're going to move him up probably at their next rankings update. But they'd be in a pinch. They'd have to kind of start looking under every rock here and there. And there's, like I said, there's some talent in state. They could try to flip a guy. There's some guys that are committed to out-of-state programs. Maybe they could flip, or maybe they just cast a wide net and recruit nationally. But right now, they don't have any other options on the table in terms of guys they've offered scholarships to that they're already actively, heavily recruiting. That would be a realistic option. They'd be having to play catch up with somebody.
Blake, go ahead and give us the super chats, and then we'll just close out after those things. And Blake, DM me so I know how many super chats that we have. Darwin says, okay, thank you, Blake. Darwin says, does the Big 12 deal help us go to the SEC? Does the new Big 12 deal help us go to the SEC earlier? I don't want to throw that on, Alex. I don't know how much time you've done.
I have no idea.
I was going to say that is not Alex's wheelhouse.
Kind of question I'm at. Like I ask you guys in Slack. I don't know.
I'll listen. I will say this. I would say, look, at the end of the day, there's not a ton of incentives because what's all boils down to the buyout. And Texas and OU are not necessarily willing to pay that buyout. And at the end of the day, there's money to be made by having Texas in this conference. Just kind of is point blank. And there's money to be made. There's a good gift for Cincinnati to say, hey, here's some Texas fans that are going to be coming to your stadium. Here's a good gift to UCF. Like, hey, this is what these guys are coming to your state. Like, it's a good gift to BYU and all these other programs. So I'm not necessarily, there's not a huge incentive for that thing to happen. And there's another portion of it, which is the television contracts, where look, they paid money for Texas and OU. Like, they had this in their contract. For them to give it up doesn't necessarily make the best sense from a TV dollar. So, look, right now, even though, look, we all want to get the hell out and see and have some games that people really, really care about week in and week out, and the excitement around that, I think 2024 will be optimistic. But right now, everyone seems to be going into 2025. I know there's optimism from the Texas people behind the scenes that 2024 will happen. But right now, there's not a current path for it to occur. What's the other one? What's the other two? Brian says Bijan mentioned, that's so funny. He mentions Bijan. Bijan's actually speaking not too far away from me right now. Bijan mentioned that Oklahoma State knew the plays and were creeping into the box on running plays. How much flexibility does Quinn Ewers have to audible out when he sees a bad setup? Alex, have you noticed Quinn doing any kind of I haven't noticed. I don't think that's really a thing.
Well, no, I mean, a lot of these run concepts have pass routes attached, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he wouldn't need to audible. He just pull the football at the mesh point and throw it. If these guys really were creeping up on the line of scrimmage, it would leave somebody hot. So I wouldn't necessarily say it would be audibling. And I say it's built into the system with the routes attached to where it's a decision that he would need to, like, yeah, you don't ever see him up there just like yelling, everybody like kill. Like, I mean, that's not how it really goes. It would be him making the decision where you saw those guys out of place and going to where the hot route was attached.
There you go, Brian. That's an excellent answer. What's the last one, Blake? Tom G, my man, I got you for a steak dinner ever since the Texas.
Did you make Blake save that one for last, Omar? Did you tell Blake save this for last? Yeah. Listen,
Alex Dunlap is a genius. In his own way. Again, I was the guy that mocked Alex when his whole request for hunting. I can come home on your land.
Hey, man, I got kicked off a lease. I had no other options, man. OB's like a fan for me, dude. Come on.
That damn thing worked. It worked. It worked like a charm.
I've made a ton, and I've not a ton, but I made a few great friends out of it, man. It's been awesome.
Yes, and so look, man, I finally put something out there about steaks and wanted to go steak, and then I went to Houston and had some of the best dinner I've had, and can't remember. So, man, yes, I'm not upset, dude. Tom, I might be able to treat you to steak actually because I got the hookup, not because I'm going to spend on it.
Tom, very well liked because all I've asked for is like a beach condo or a mountain condo. I mean, nothing big, right? But nobody's come through yet. Hey, I want to house sit for a weekend. Somebody. Blake, by any chance, do you still have Alex? You'll appreciate this.
Blake, do you still have the pictures of the car that Tom G recently purchased? Do you have that in somewhere in your files? Because so Tom, just so you know, Alex, is him and El Presidente. They come on my shows every Wednesday night. They're really fun guys. And one of the times that he couldn't make it was because he purchased a brand new car that is super badass, and so it was getting. I don't think it was getting flown. It was being delivered, and he had to go and get it. Blake is going to pull it up, and I want you to see it. It's I believe it's like a Porsche. If I'm absolutely correct. Yeah.
Well, I knew El Presidente was rich, but I guess Tom G's rich too.
Yeah, no,
you can tell by El Presidente's setup, man. I've seen his house, dude.
Oh yeah. El Presidente has shown me the photos of the private planes that they've taken to Mexico. So so it just so happens that two of the guys who love Drunk Uncle are actually loaded like shit. Like so you talk about friends that you've made on OB. Like these are like my new best friends. Blake, do you got it yet? I don't want to hold up the show too much longer if you don't have it. If you don't, it's good. We'll just start getting into some party shots. All right. As Blake looks for that, and it is the show. The car is badass. He's kind of loading it up. Why don't you, Jason? Oh, here we go.
Oh, Jesus! Look at that thing.
Yeah. That was Tom's new whip that he was able to apprehend.
My God.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Jeez. I'm just wondering, like, it's so funny. It's like a damn truck. A new truck these days costs you as much as a small house. How much do actually expensive cars now cost, dude? My God.
Trucks are ridiculous, man. I don't even know what's going on. I'm out there. I've decided, listen, I think I've decided. I'm come to this recent decision. So I got a 2013 Ford Taurus, which wasn't a cop car when I purchased it, but it apparently is evolved into one. I've just decided going forward that I will not only I'm going to ride it till the wheels fall off. When the engine goes in it, I'm just going to buy a new one. I'm just gonna be like $3,000 for a new engine is gonna be better than dropping like $40,000 on a new car. Like just
$40K. He's get off. Jason did what? Jason has got a new mid-sized truck. I was asking him how much it cost. He was like, I forgot what you told me, Jason. But I'm like, Jesus Christ! And you look at, but then you look at, and like it was like a year or something old whenever you got it, right? And like you look at some of these, like a brand new like F-150, which is with a good trim package or something. Like, you're literally looking at like $85K. It's like it's ridiculous, dude. I go out and I buy a 2009 F-150 with like roll down windows from a guy that was from an old man that was a plumber for $14,000 straight. It only has 38,000 miles on it, dude. I'm gonna drive that thing until my kids are in college.
Listen, and thank God Covert Ford isn't a sponsor for this segment, but it's 100%. So I'm with you. But Tom G's got a nice ass whips, there. So does Catch Drive? No, Catch Drive is an expedition. That's a weird question, but no. Catches drives a nice Ford Expedition, really nice vehicle. So, all right, let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. I know we've been going for a while. I know Jason's hungry, so Jason, since you are the hungriest, why don't you just any final things that you wrote on your thoughts, whether it's something personal life, whether you just want to talk about the season, to get the hell out of here, whatever you think, whatever you got for me, Jason.
No, just like I said, got back from vacation late last night, rolled into the driveway like 11:30 or something like that. So hit the phones this morning, woke up this morning, started hitting the phones, and got Derek Hunter, a big 2023 JUCO defensive tackle that Texas offered. He actually went to A&M out of high school, then transferred, went to JUCO, went from defensive line to offensive line. Now he's back to defensive line. Told me he'll be in town for the TCU game on November 12th. That'll be an unofficial visit. Tyler Scott is a DB that Texas offered just last night, and I hit him up this morning, and he told me he'll be in for an official visit for that TCU game. So a couple little Monday morning recruiting news and notes of interest for people on Orangebloods.
Alex?
Yeah, I got nothing. Happy Halloween, everybody. Okay. Happy Halloween. The best candy is Mentos fruit chews.
So for mine's is, Alex, if your kids want to come trick or treating with mine,
Not
then
allowed.
they will absolutely, because
Not allowed.
my kids, we will. I've got so much candy that what I do, Alex, is the candy that I usually have left over, whether I bought it or they've gone trick or treating, that ends up being stocking stuffers for Christmas. So I usually just throw a bunch of that in there, and then eventually past Christmas, then I get rid of everything, because it's usually sitting up there and they have other things that they want to get into. So but yes, Alex will be what are you handing out? Alex is gonna, like, that person is gonna be handing out like toothbrushes and toothpaste tonight at the house, right? And dental floss.
I won't be handing out a damn thing. I'll have my lights turned off and my old ass Rottweiler sitting right by that front door. No way, man. These kids aren't coming around here. Dude, it is dangerous, man, to come. You'll fall off a damn cliff, man, down into the creek if you come try trick or treating around here. I take my kids across the street. We take the ATV up the street and we go to the neighborhood that my daughter's school's in. It's like a subdivision. I don't live in a subdivision, dude. I mean, my neighbor has a 25-acre horse farm over across the creek. It isn't very easy to get to other people's houses here.
So out of curiosity, Alex, so like when it comes Christmas time, like, are the kids allowed to open all their gifts, or can they only open like one in segments, right? Did they have to wait? Like, do they have to do it in increments?
No, man. It's an absolute free for all. And you guys have seen the Carl Griswold trees that I buy, man. I get those big 14-footers, man.
Yes.
I'm probably a cooler dad about Christmas stuff than I am about Halloween stuff.
All right. Well, definitely on that, what Blake's saying, and roll the dice for their gifts.
I didn't even tell you guys the worst part about and we call it this dice rolling thing. We call it the squid game, right? And they got to play the squid game. And whenever you do it, if you roll the one, you don't get candy, right? But if you roll the one, but then when you roll the one again the other time, or if you roll the one, you got to roll it again, because if you roll a second one, neither of them gets candy, and the candy gets taken away for the rest of the whole year. So,
my goodness. Yeah. You're gonna turn those kids into like gambling addicts before they even like get out of elementary school.
Snake eyes, man. You can't get snake eyes in the squid game.
Alex is the most.
Hey, didn't you message us like earlier and said like your son wants to go to Vegas and you're taking him in around Christmas or something like that? Now it all makes sense. Yeah. You're like, all right, son, let's go to the craps table.
Alex with the most sadistic parenting routine that I think I've ever heard of. But we will see how that works out for you, Kai. And so for Alex Dunlop, who apparently is the Grinch of Halloween, which we didn't know was possible, and Jason Sukumel, who had some good old romantic time with the wife and blew her back out once again. And then, of course, Jeff Ketchum, who's not here. And, of course, for our man Rich with the Rogue Shop, don't forget, they've got all your hookups, all your needs. They got everything that you want. So make sure you hit up Rich at therogueshop.com. They make sure you use that promo code Orangebloods for all the crew. Hey, I'm going to find where Alex lives. I'm just going to throw candy over the fence and see if his kids find it for those guys. Until we guys talk later. Guys, take care. See ya.